Hello and welcome to Front End Horse Live. Chat is already going off. Bruno, thank you so much for that raid. We just got like 70 people dumped in, so we started a little early. Wow, welcome everyone. We already have some subs, some follows. Thank you, B1 Mind, for that sub. Bruno, thank you so much for the raid. Super, super awesome of you to do that. Let me know what you were working on. And everyone, welcome. If you're a fan of creative, CSS, 3D, all that kind of stuff, we do a ton of that here. We always have fantastic people on. And one of those fantastic people just happens to be Kevin Powell. Kevin, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Just getting over a cold, so hopefully I'll try my best to mute myself if I have to cough or make any disgusting noises. But
That's going to be, no, I promised people that content. I said, hey, you've got to come to the stream. Kevin's real sniffly today. Like, it's going to be top-notch stuff. So we have a lot of weird fans in the chat. They might not be fans of CSS. They're more like sniffling and coughing fans. So chat, thank you so much for all these follows. Great to see all of you. But yeah, Kevin, I'm thrilled to have you on. You also stream here. Let me actually do a little shout out. Kevin, oh, you got a long one. Powell.
oh, yeah, sorry.
It's totally fine. CSS, that should work. I think that should work. But yeah, follow Kevin here on Twitch. You also have a YouTube channel. I will be dropping all those links and everything in the chat. I'll be looking at your website. But for someone who might just be coming from Bruno's stream and doesn't really know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so as you said, CSS is mostly what I talk about these last few years, and it's sort of what I've become known about. And so what I try and say is, I'm trying to help people fall in love with CSS, and if not fall in love with it, at least be a little bit less frustrated by it.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's it. For me, it's a beautiful language. It's a lot of fun to write. I know people get frustrated with it because it doesn't do quite what they want it to. So I try and show that it makes sense once you understand how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, I love that.
At least most of the time.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think people get very frustrated by it, but then once they kind of once you have correct mental models around it, I think it makes a lot more sense. Where it's like, oh, I assumed it was going to work this way, but actually, like once you understand things like the box model, it's like, oh, it's starting to click now. I get how things should work, right? So that's awesome. That's kind of your purpose. That's just fantastic. And yeah, didn't know Kevin streamed. Good to know. Yeah, absolutely. And I will drop your site. Let's actually just real quick check out your site just so people can follow you. I think that links out to all of your things. Yeah, you have YouTube,
Yep.
you have articles, courses, Patreon.
Don't have or Twitch is in the bottom because I wasn't doing it very much at the time, but
Yeah, all good. And you got your Twitter. So yeah, please go follow Kevin if you're not already. Thor's Mighty Arse says, it was Kevin's free course that finally made me feel like I know roughly what I'm doing with CSS. Awesome. So you just said your intent, and Thor comes in and says you're delivering. So that's got to feel good to hear.
definitely.
So yeah, so we know you as a CSS guy. CSS Subgrid is what we're going to be talking about today. I love Grid. We've had Grid for a few years now. I use it like whenever possible, pretty much. I love being able to like do things like naming my areas and just like everything that comes with it. Gap is now in Flexbox, but for a while it was just like a Grid exclusive, and that was one of the best things ever. I'm happy, man. I'm happy with Grid. Why do we need another like layer deep? Like Grid solving a lot of problems for me. What's CSS Subgrid gonna do for us?
So yeah, it when the initial Grid spec was actually put together, Subgrid was part of it.
Okay.
But one of the cool things with Grid was that it got implemented really fast by all the browsers. They're just like, yep, let's do this. Even Internet Explorer, like they all got behind it.
Got it.
And one of the reasons that they were able to do that is they decided, let's simplify things and take Subgrid out and make that part of the level 2 spec so we can just get this working.
Got
and
it.
So they did that, and it worked out great.
It's the case of the MVP ships, and then it's like, yeah, all that stuff's, we'll get to it.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's sort of what it's become. But once, and I actually, when Firefox first started supporting it, I was playing around with it right away because I just assumed that the other browsers would be shortly behind on it. And I was just like, I had to stop using it at one point just to play around because I was so sad that I couldn't use it more. And I say I've been saying lately, and I've been sort of talking a lot about Subgrid this month just to try and raise awareness and make people realize that it, because there's so many good things coming to CSS. Like there's really exciting, amazing things coming.
Really? Yeah.
We have container queries and the query units. We have the contrast things,
Yeah, there's a
the new
new
color
color
spec,
things. Yeah. Like
and
it feels
like
like there's something new every other week that's just like, wow, this is gonna change the way we do things. And
yeah, and especially like container queries, I think have potential to really completely change the game, which is amazing.
yeah.
But I was sort of sad at the same time because I'm like, well, there's all this energy behind all these new things, but we didn't do that old thing yet.
That's still
And
sitting on the shelf.
yeah, and it's like, is this just going to get forgotten about? Are people not going to worry about it because there's these new flashy, cool things that everyone is so excited by? So I was sort of wanting to sort of bring it back as much as I could and let people see what we're missing out on.
Cool.
And I say that subgrid is what we thought grid was going to be.
Okay.
Um, and it was through doing a lot of things with grid that I started running into occasional problems with it where you set the same grid up, and we'll play with some code in a minute. We'll see it in action where you use the same grid in multiple places, but you're actually getting different results on each one. And it's the most frustrating experience.
Okay. All right.
And that's really where subgrid comes in, and it makes sure that, and for people who have no idea what it is, we're going to see it soon. But it's where the children can use the parents' grid lines. But where it gets a little bit weird is that the children are also influencing the grid lines, because
Oh.
the grid's influenced by the content depending on how you've set things up. But like, right, if you have more text somewhere, that column
Right.
might get larger. So this children can have that effect on the parents one, and you can even nest subgrids within subgrids, and it can get kind of cool. I think there's always the issue of added complexity
Yeah, that
sometimes when
sounds
you start doing these things. So I do think there's like a balance to find with it all. And lately I've just been experimenting a lot with it. And so the things we'll be talking about and looking at today, it's sort of where my mind's currently at with it, but there's been an evolution as we're going through all of this. And, part of this is going to have fun and just experiment too. I think we can try out some different things and see what happens.
awesome. I'm here
So
for it.
yeah,
I think the chat's here for it. Me Too says, wow, Firefox added support way back in 2019. Not kidding when the other browsers are behind. Like, that's
yeah.
and like you said to me before the stream, it's not even like Firefox nightly or Firefox like tucked behind some flag. It's just sitting there. It's just sitting in Firefox, right?
Yeah. And even because they even it's still the level 3 of grid is actually bringing in masonry layout to CSS.
Right.
I know that's in Firefox. I don't know if it's in the production or if that's still tucked away somewhere,
Okay.
because it was experimental and it had a few little bugs with it still. But like I'm like, they're already at level 3. Firefox. They're also looking at being able to decorate gaps now too in grid within Firefox.
Decorate gaps, like do like a border
Like put
there,
like a
or?
border between, like within your
Got it.
gaps
So
and
the
stuff.
so the
Yeah.
gap's not just dead space, but it's stylable space.
Yeah.
Can't say that right.
And I think one of the reasons it happened was just at the time Jen Simmons was with the Firefox team, and
Got
so
it.
she had a big influence, I think, on the direction they were going in. So
Right.
she probably got. But then when she went over to Safari, I'm like, oh, does that mean Grid's coming soon? But so far, no. We'll see. We'll see what happens with
Yeah.
it.
Hopefully soon. But we'll see. In before radial gradient gaps. Jen Simmons, my queen. Yes, Manny, good to see you. Thor asks, last time I looked, I couldn't do transitions on grid properties. Has that improved? That would be nice.
Mm. That's another area where Firefox is leading the game. They're
Oh,
supposed to
okay.
be animated properties, and only Firefox does animate them. So you could actually,
Oh.
like, if you animate the width, like your grid template columns, you could. I played around with something once on a live stream where it was like a 2 column setup, but then if you clicked on one side, like it would just that side would take over, or you could switch back and
Oh,
forth,
that's
and you could
awesome.
animate the columns.
It's not just like
But
a hard snap. They would grow and shrink.
yeah.
Nice.
And so it is part of the spec. It's supposed to be there, but the other browsers haven't gone on it yet.
Still on the to-do list for the other browsers. Got it. All right. Is there anything else that we wanted to cover, or did we want to kind of jump into some code?
Yeah, I think we can jump in and experiment a
All
little bit
right,
here.
awesome.
So
I've got
we
these
can,
two pens that you sent over. So I've got grid versus subgrid and layout with subgrid. Do we want to start on one of these or somewhere else?
yeah, let's do the grid versus subgrid one.
All right, cool.
So we can look at,
I'll drop this into chat to share with them, just so that they can fork it. Is that cool?
perfect.
Awesome.
Yep, awesome. And
Cool.
so yeah, this one we'll sort of see why grid, the issues that can come up with grid. So the first thing we could do, if you just scroll down on the actual page, just so people can see the content. I just made a bunch of cards
Yeah.
that are there. They're very simple looking. And if we look in the HTML, I just have an H1, and then inside there a main grid class that then has a bunch of cards in it. So nothing too
Cool.
complicated. So if we start and go into the CSS and declare a display grid on our main grid there, I've already right at the top. Yeah,
Cool.
you can just throw a
Uh,
display grid.
should I do it at the top here? Is that
Sure.
cool? Cool.
And when you do display grid, it's a little bit disappointing, unlike Flex, where fun stuff happens. With grid, nothing happens at the beginning. So let's go into and create some grid template columns. And just do 1FR 2 times. And
Cool.
if anybody's not familiar with grid, we're basically just saying that now we have 2 columns, and the FR unit is a grid-only unit that lets us. It basically means it's sort of like a flex. I could be wrong on this, so don't quote me on it, but I think it's based on the flex algorithm on
Oh,
how it works to get them to be flexible.
got it.
And it's a little bit like if you did 2FR, 1FR, then it's like it deals with how to distribute extra space and stuff. But it's a
It's
nice, easy way to get columns.
the FR is like a fractional unit or something, right?
Yeah, so it's sort of like it's saying like we're use the divide the available space effectively.
Cool.
And it gets a little bit weird depending on the situation that you're in, but most of the time it just works really well.
Awesome.
And when you mentioned gaps, we could add a gap of 1 rem or something, or 1 m or anything, just so we
Cool.
have some space in between them.
Nice.
And then let's go into the card class. I mean, at this stage, the grid is working perfectly fine. I think
Yep.
we get a nice grid of cards and there's nothing too problematic. But if we add a grid inside of our cards themselves, so we can do a display grid in there too.
Yep.
And then do the same thing, grid template columns, 1FR, 1FR is fine. This is my one problem with grid, is grid template columns is so long to write.
Yeah, they can be pretty verbose. Also, I feel like my fingers are a little cold. I think my
No,
roof's a little cold, so
yeah.
it's gonna be a little bit some some clunky typing, I feel like.
So when we first do that on the card, things look a little funky because everything's trying to fall into its own cell and stuff like this. And I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of people default to using Flex instead of Grid, is
Mm,
because when this happens, you go, oh my goodness, that's not what I want. There's more work to be done. And you sort of, sometimes when you know how Flex works, or, you can work a bit faster. But I find I've been using Grid over Flex a lot more just because you get a little bit more control on what's actually happening.
yeah.
So if you make a new selector for the card image, if we just do card dot card space image, because I don't have a class on those, or just img, sorry.
No worries. So just so you know, I have a habit of just like being a stenographer basically. So
Perfect.
I I I can come back to it, but I might just type out exactly what you tell me.
Yeah.
Bad habit. So
So on there, what we want here is for the card or the image to be on one side, and then all the text right next to it on the other side.
okay.
So we can give that a grid row of 1/2, and it should fix things a little bit.
Cool.
And oh, sorry, 1/3. My bad.
Got it. So we
There
want
we
it
go.
to span from the first row down
Yeah,
through
and actually, if you
to the third.
turn, yeah, it's a little bit awkward in CodePens with the dev tools sometimes, but later on, maybe we could turn them on so you get the grid inspector, because
Yeah,
that just helps
I
see.
can have it inspect. I can have it popped out. Where's the button for that? How do I separate
There
window?
you go.
Yeah, so at least we can like have it affecting it, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? But it doesn't have to take up screen real estate.
Just
Flex.
sometimes when we update the CSS, the CodePen refreshes, and then it you lose the grid that you had.
Yeah, good point.
I
All
still
right.
use it all the time.
So there's yeah.
And
So
then there should be the other grid. Oh,
for
yeah, there we go.
for chat, yeah, I toggled these two buttons here, and I think Chrome has these kinds of buttons now where if you hit it, it'll show you the grid lines to kind of give you like
Mhm.
an X-ray vision sort of thing. It's pretty handy.
I still prefer the Firefox ones because, like, say you have grid template, you have like your named areas. They really put like here's the area name, and it's really obvious. Whereas in Chrome, it's like this little
Oh,
tag in the top corner, and I'm like, I like the big one that just like is in my face. I can see
oh,
it without
that's
thinking about
nice.
it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So we can sort of see there on that first card because the lines that are on there, like the lorem ipsum is in one box, the text is in another box, and then our image is going over two different columns there.
Right.
So we can fix that just a little bit, and we'll do that just if you give, on the image itself, actually, if we stay there and you give it a width and a height of 100%, and then an object fit of cover, which maybe I had on. And for those who don't know, that's like a background size of cover. No, I didn't have one. Okay. If ever you did a background size of cover and it sort of crops your image, you can do that with object fit on an actual image, and I
Got
find
it.
that works really well.
Okay.
And then let's go up to our card itself. Sorry, up a little bit.
Yeah.
The card class, just to give it a gap too, just so everything's not stuck together.
You want to do like half a rem or a rem?
Sure. I'll let you decide.
Cool. Artistic direction.
There we. All right. So
Sure.
let's just say, like, we're happy. There's improvements that could be made here.
Yes.
But already, could you make the window a bit bigger? Actually, the visual. Yeah.
That one? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Okay. So
chugging
at
a
this
little
screen
bit.
size, everything looks perfectly fine, and there's no issues. We have the same grid on all of our cards. They're all looking the same. But once you start making the viewports smaller, you'll actually see that the grids will behave differently. And this is, so there we go. Even like one of the images is almost completely disappearing there.
Oh yeah.
Um, and there's ways of trying to fight this that are really awkward and would actually cause some overflow.
Hmm.
In this situation anyway. And there's different situations you could run into. Obviously, you could have a media query that would sort of get you out of trouble or whatever. But the main reason this is happening is that really long word. Because we're using
Right.
the FR will shrink it, but it goes, oh, I can't shrink any more than this because that I'm not breaking the word. So maybe you could come in with word break. You can start getting into situations where a lot more work would come and solve the problem. But you get this inconsistency between all of these cards, even though they're all using the same CSS to
Right.
create the layout, which is a little bit counterintuitive and one of those things that I think people get annoyed with CSS about along the way. And this is like sort of a simplified version of how this could come in and cause problems.
Yeah. But I've definitely
Um,
faced problems like
yeah.
these before. Absolutely. When making cards, yeah.
Yeah,
This is pretty
and I've
common.
even had it where I had like a main grid, like a grid at the top for my navigation, not so much for the nav itself, but just like, okay, I want it to be the same sort of lining up as another grid I have here and another grid I have here, and then everything, like I had equal columns and they're still all out of whack, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, this is a nightmare. So we can fix this with Subgrid. and
Nice.
and that's because now when I say fix it, they might not look fantastic because here we're getting this little tiny image. But we'll see how the subgrid sort of comes in and makes everything at least more consistent, if nothing
Okay.
else.
Cool.
So if we go on there's a few different changes actually and this is one of those things when you use the subgrid, you sort of have to change your thinking a little bit. Because originally we were going, okay, I want 2 rows of cards, and then my cards will each have, or sorry, 2 columns of cards, and then each card will have 2 columns inside of it.
Right.
If you want to use subgrid for something like this, you sort of have to think bigger picture from when you start at the main grid.
So we're gonna start 4 columns to start with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
This is making sense.
So if we go up to there, we can just bring in 4 columns instead of
Should
2.
we do like a repeat?
Yeah, that sounds good. And that obviously breaks everything because now everything's trying to live on that 4 column grid that we
Right.
just made.
Right.
So now on the card itself, the first thing we'd want to do is say that the grid column is, you can just put span 2. It's just span space 2.
Oh,
Yeah,
my fault.
there we go.
Thank you.
And so then it goes back to what we had before.
Cool.
There's basically no difference.
Right.
Uh,
Or
because
we
we
would still
have,
have that problem.
yeah.
Yeah.
But we're just saying now they're spanning across two columns on the parent grid. And then so instead of the grid template columns 1FR, 1FR, we can just write the word subgrid. So grid template columns become subgrid.
Ah, if I could spell it. That's,
And I think it's already working.
yeah, I think so too. It looks like it's lined up there. That's all that was. I was really
Yeah.
curious about like what complex syntax are we gonna get into here? I was waiting to type out all kinds of stuff. Kevin, that's it?
That's it.
No, but like that's it?
Yeah.
That's so cool. Okay, so we're specifying for the grid template columns just like, hey, basically in inherent from your parent. Or
Exactly. But
um
it's not, I mean,
yeah.
it's different from inherit, right? Because it's not, don't, if it was a simple inherit, it
Yes,
would
right.
be
Thank you.
really similar to what we had before.
It would be, yeah.
So it's really saying like, don't inherit, use those
Yes, thank
ones.
you.
Yeah.
Good fix there because inherit means something.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
exactly. Yeah.
very very good point. Thank you for the follow, and chat is loving that too. That's it. Enjoy RB. Don't know. Yeah, me too. Saying all right, bye. That's it. That's all we need. Wow, that was surprisingly terse. Just in the sense of like that's all we had to change.
Hmm.
And I think we're gonna get into it later, but like we could do that again in Cards Child and everything.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and that's where it's some things get a little bit complex when you start doing that. Just keeping track, because one thing that's really interesting with this, first of all, you can overwrite stuff really easily. So we're already doing that with our gap property. So on the card, if you delete gap, it's going to use the parents gap because it's using the template columns.
That
So
makes
it
sense.
so by default, it will use the parents one. But if you tell it, if you define your own gap, it will
I can
overwrite the one
override
that
it.
was
That's
there. Yeah.
really nice. Yeah,
So
and chat. This is only Firefox right now. So
mhm,
at the start, we kind of said how this has been out in Firefox since 2019, and it started out as part of the CSS Grid spec. But only Firefox kind of brought it to the to that full spec. Everyone else kind of just delivered Grid as it is right now, and so Kevin is partly here to kind of advocate on behalf of like, hey, can you finish that to-do list you started? Chrome,
please.
Safari, everyone else, because I want that. Like I already am. I hate to say this. I'm already a little sad that I have to go back to not having this.
Yeah.
Like this is just like a nice little glimpse into like a future that is not going to be here for at least a little bit. But this is so I immediately get how this is useful because yeah, like just seeing the line cut through this card and go into that card and know that all these things are going to adhere to that line. That's like half my battle when I'm styling things. It's just like, all right, how do I line up things across an entire web page template? Because as you said, like you're going through, you're trying to get everything to kind of be. You don't want like the sides of your web page to like cut into like 1,000 pixels and then 1,010 out here and then right,
Yeah.
like you don't want that inconsistency. This just makes that way easier. Wow, this is awesome.
So if you want, we could go to the next code pen then, and you could
Yeah,
that was sort of planned for exactly what you're talking about, where sort of consistency through a larger scale situation.
cool.
With this one, a little bit of this is me, going through my thought process on how this might be something we could start using. So I'm not
Okay.
100% sure if this is a good idea or not, but I do think it shows a little bit of how we can use it.
Okay.
And one of my favorite things with Grid is the way we can simplify HTML in the beginning. Because even when you're doing Flex, if you need two columns and stuff, you're often wrapping things in extra divs just to get it to work. Whereas when you get into Grid, you can just place things where you need them to be.
Yeah.
So with Subgrid, I find it takes that even to the next level if you want it to.
Okay.
And I am worried that maybe, like, I did put a video out, and even when I was editing it, I was looking at it going, like, definitely some people are going to be looking at this going, the setup is too complex, even though the end result
Mm,
gets you what you want. So I think I've come up with a better solution now than what I did in my video a few weeks ago. So,
got it.
but I'd love to like know your thoughts on this as we go through it,
Cool. And
on
chat,
if you
yeah.
think it makes sense in the chat and everything.
We got
Just
Steph in the
because,
chat. Good to see you,
nice.
Steph.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we got some very very smart people hanging out in chat, and they can definitely let us know if this is a good way to go.
awesome. Yeah. So in this situation, I've already sort of set up, I think, all the HTML. And this is something I did when Grid first came out. This was one of my first thoughts of using it, was like, well, I don't need a container class anymore. I can just use my grid and put things on, like, I have like the two columns could be empty space, and then my content in the middle would just live there. But then I ran into that problem of, if you have multiple grids, sometimes there's that inconsistency.
Right.
So with Subgrid, I'm like, oh, well, maybe I can bring that idea back a little bit. And if you look at the HTML here, I've literally just like, there's no containers, there's no rows, there's no columns. I'm just putting like section of content, some content, some content. So I have my header. After that, I don't even have, I just have like an H2, or we're going to add some divs here actually. We'll have to wrap things a little bit to get it to work properly.
But for the most
Um,
part, this is just like
but just
yeah,
trying
your
to
main
be
thing.
like
Yeah.
as sparse as I can, putting the content that I need in there.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it a little bit like, if you're new to a project and you're going into it and you don't have like 20 divs just to organize some content, I think it makes it easier to see what's actually happening there. You can just see, okay, I have an intro here, and then I have another section here, and I have another section there, and there's not 5 layers of divs just to get the layout that I need.
Right.
But again, maybe I'm pushing it too far and having a little bit of organizational stuff. Like, there's nothing wrong with divs, just we don't want to overdo it, obviously.
Yeah. There's a limit here, right? Like adding a couple's not bad. Yeah. When you have to scroll way to the right just to see where the tree ends,
Yeah,
gets to be a bit.
yeah, it gets a little frustrating.
Yeah.
Um, so what we could do is, in the CSS, we could go on our main grid and once again define our first grid.
Cool. Oh, not griddle. Nope. Still no. Got it.
So for this one, there's a few different approaches that I've sort of started taking. But what I would, and this is where sort of like that not needing a container comes in, and it does make the grid template rows a little bit verbose, but columns, I mean, but we'll try it out. And I saw some questions in the chat about using subgrid on rows. We're going to get there, but it's just a little
Awesome.
bit, um, that's, it's really intuitive how it works with columns. It's not as intuitive with how it works with rows, and for a good reason, but anyway,
Okay.
we'll see that in a little bit.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah. But we could set up some grid template columns once you've had your sip of water.
Sorry, I got parched just at that
Mm.
moment.
It's always how it is, right? Right as that you get thrown to you.
Uh,
So here, what I want to do is sort of set up an area where we'll have those empty sides, like I talked about.
cool.
So for now, and we'll fix it so it looks a little bit better later. But for now, just put one rem.
Okay.
Then in the middle, we'll do a repeat of 3. And on that one, we could do, yeah, I'm trying to think. We'll try one FR, but it might not work because
Okay.
when I first tried this, I did something different, and then one rem, exactly.
Cool.
So that obviously it breaks the entire layout, because the content's trying to place itself on the grid. It's going, I have 3 columns. I'm just going to shuffle around and try and be where I can within there. So that's also another frustrating thing when you do this. Sometimes, this first step gets you sort of going, well, that's not at all what I want.
Right.
So what I would do now is do a new selector, which is main grid, and then the descendant, so like the greater than one, and star. So we just select all the direct children,
Cool.
and we can say that the grid column is a 2 over -2. And this is a cool thing with the grid columns, is it should put it all in the middle, and then we get that 1 rem of space on each side.
So is this starting at column 2 and then we go to the end and come back? Right.
Exactly.
That's what the negative does. Got it.
Yeah. So whenever you can only, it's a little weird. I find it a little frustrating, but the negative numbers only work if you've defined the grid template columns, because you could actually place things on a grid. Like, you could tell it to go to like column 17, even if you don't have one, and it's going to create a whole bunch of columns just so it can place that on the 17th column. But you can't use the negative numbers then, because you didn't define them when you made your actual
Got it.
grid.
That makes sense. Like count down from what? right?
Exactly.
As
Yeah.
I think Lil Jon famously said, "Countdown from what was that song?" Right? Yeah. No. Bad joke.
And I already see a little bit of an issue. So let's go back up to the grid, the initial grid template columns that we made, just so this sort of shows the power of it a little more.
Here, cool.
Yeah, right there. Yeah. So on the repeat, instead of one FR, let's change that to be a min max. And I'll explain a
Is
little bit
that
what this is
just
going to
like
do.
that, or is there a hyphen? I always forget.
That's it. Yeah, just
Cool.
like that. And then we'll do a 0, comma, say 25 rem. And let's change the 1 rems that are on the left and the right to min maxes as well.
Okay.
And we'll make those a 1 rem, comma, 1 FR.
Okay, I'm gonna copy and paste
And the
that.
same thing for the other one, yeah.
Cool.
And now if you make it bigger, there we go. Okay, so it sort of recreated the whole like container vibe that we'd normally need to have, where you
Right.
define, a max something, a div or multiple divs to sort of hold your content in place.
And is that width 25 rem times 3?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
So our max width right now is that 75 rem. And then
Yep.
so what the min max is doing for people who aren't familiar with that is it's saying here's a minimum and a maximum value, and you can't be smaller than the smallest, you can't be bigger than the biggest, and we'll sort of figure out the middle ground. And so the 0.25 is saying they technically could shrink down to nothing, or they can grow up to a maximum width of 25 each.
Awesome.
Whereas the two outer ones at small screens will act as a bit of padding just to keep it off the edge. So we have 1 rem minimum size to stop things from hitting the sides of the screen. And then the 1FR kicks in only once there's available leftover space. So that's once we've hit our 75 rem of total space, then it goes, oh, now I have equal space. I'm going to distribute it in these empty areas on the two sides.
Cool. That's really handy. And it's just
Yeah,
great
so
result.
that's just using the grid, and we can sort of get to a fun, interesting place.
Cool.
Just on doing that. So I think that's kind of fun, but it is quite a bit of setup, I think, just to get to what we could do in a simpler way. So I do think this is where Subgrid sort of comes in and becomes a little bit more fun, though. And one of the nice things with Grid too is you're able to, like, if you have a regular container class and occasionally you need to break out of that, it's a nightmare. And there's tricks on doing it, and it's sort of hacky where you're actually shrinking things down and then pulling them wider again with transforms. And it's a cool
Yeah,
trick
that
to be able to
gets.
do, but it's
But
kind of annoying.
it's a hack. Like
Yeah.
it's a useful hack, and it has a good result and everything. But it's not a it's not like you're not using the system of grid. You're kind of like working around it.
Yeah, exactly. So when we have a grid like this, we can take advantage of that to get outside of this container area really easily. So let's make a new class called full width. And for that, you want to guess what I'm gonna put in there?
It's gonna be grid column 1, or like span. I don't know the best way to do a full span, but basically this one's gonna just span across all of them.
Yeah. So exactly. So you can even paste that in if you want, or grid column. And then instead of saying 2 over -2, we want to go from 1 to -1. So it's really
Okay,
saying
cool.
from one extreme all the way to the other.
Okay.
And if we put that on that header one, this section intro that I created, we could add that full width. And there we go. So
There we
we've
go.
broken out of the grid. We now have it going full size. And I put just a box shadow on there, but this is where you have a background color or something like that, and you want it to expand outwardly.
Awesome. And there's the grid
And actually in the dev
columns.
tools, if you put them, there's a little toggle for line numbers that should make it sort of just stand out a little bit more on the right side.
Display line numbers.
There
Oh,
you go.
nice. Okay, cool. And display area names. That's awesome. We don't have any area names right now, but that's what you were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And actually, really interestingly, we could even try and play with it. Why don't we do that? I wasn't planning on that, but we could do that. That could be kind of cool here. So we'll do two things. We'll
Okay,
just do it with the way I was going to look at it, and then we'll come in with the area names because with Subgrid, it's kind of interesting there too.
cool.
So the first thing, like we sort of broke out of the grid, but we sort of want to keep the text within the grid. So we can make a new class that would be just I've been doing it with really sort of obtuse selectors, but I think creating like a subgrid class or an inner grid class or something makes more sense. So it
Okay.
could even just be subgrid. And then it would be a grid template columns subgrid.
Uh, That's so cool that just
Works, yeah. So if we
yeah
throw that on that intro where we did the full width,
on
the header
this
there,
same
yeah,
class. Okay, cool.
just add subgrid on there.
Call it subgrid.
And
All
now
right.
the content will start flowing on that parent's grid if we did it correctly. Oh, we also need a display grid. I always do that on the subgrid class.
Good call.
Yeah.
That
Sorry.
okay. No. That is one that like I'm glad we hit that because that's one that I'm going to battle with at some point when I try to recreate that. Like it was so easy when Kevin was doing it.
Yeah.
So all right. So if you're using subgrid, if you basically if you're using actually that's not true, right? I was gonna say if you're using any kind of grid property, you need to play grid, but that's not true. Um, but if you're using subgrid, you need to put display grid on there. Like those two have to go together. Got it. That's very helpful. Thor's Mighty Ars. I love that name. Thor, you are new here. You are very very welcome here. I love it. He looked away for 2 minutes. Why is it -1? To count back from the opposite side. Negative numbers come in like start at the end of your columns or I guess of your rows also, and count back. So it's from the beginning to the end column.
Yep,
Cool.
exactly. So this is where I was going to come in with a different way to get these to actually line up and be where we want them to be. But why don't we go all the way up to or on the main grid selector in our CSS?
Cool.
And why don't we add some grid template areas in here?
Okay, nice. This is one of my favorite features.
So the one thing that's important to remember here is the leftmost and the rightmost columns. We want to make sure that they're always empty. So, and grid template areas, it's a bit weird because when you define them, you have to put them inside quotation marks, but when you use them, you don't. Exactly. So we want the dot, and we use the dot just to say like we're not worried. This is not a named area. We're not using that column.
Cool.
Then we could put say title space, or maybe we do title text or body or
we need one more, right? Yeah.
something for that paragraph, and then another dot.
Cool.
Exactly. And then so even though we're declaring this on the parent, because we're using subgrid, those named areas are available on the child's subgrid.
Okay.
So if we make a selector in our CSS for the section intro.
Section intro, so like here.
And we could just do like section intro space H1.
Cool.
And then say the grid area is our title.
And that's not in quotes, right?
Correct, yeah, which I've ran into so many problems with. Now what's happened is the text has tried to go into that empty space. So if we fix that,
cool,
and say that the section intro P is in the, I think you called it body.
I think I did. P. Let's double check. Yep, and that works just how we would expect. Awesome, and it's respecting that side, and that's inside a different thing like that. Like just to point out again, chat, that's subgrid. That's subgrid that's doing that. Also, really cool that it has a subgrid, like it
tag,
flags that. Yeah. So it's respecting its parent's grid because we're telling it to, or it's using it. I'm trying to get that diction right. It's not inheriting it. It's not respecting. It's using that same grid.
What's
and
actually
areas.
kind of weird with I'm super happy this actually works. Even I don't think the areas is as practical just because the subgrid will probably take up, like you're using it for more, you're placing lots of things on the subgrid. So I think the named areas aren't as useful necessarily.
Right.
But I do find it really cool that it can work, even though you're not saying like grid template areas subgrid. Like you don't have to do that. It's just your rows and your columns that we're worried about.
Right. Yeah, this like there's so many times where like you have to style things, and the fact that there's like a div in the way or that there isn't a div there, like really makes or breaks a layout. So the fact that yes, there's a div in the way, but now Subgrid kind of like lets me X-ray through that div and still apply these grid styles onto the contents there. Like I need a wrapping div there for some other reason, some functional reason maybe, or whatever, right? But I can still apply grid to that. That's useful, Kevin, and I'm gonna say right now we should bring that to all browsers. I'm taking a really hot take on this. I want this elsewhere. Oh, they're asking for
The
the
link.
yeah. So this is not the finished example, me too, but I can definitely get you that. Here, I'll fork off this one. That's a phrase
Oh,
that
and
sounds like
actually,
I'm
I just saw
angry.
somebody linked to the Chromium
Ooh,
bug tracking
awesome.
on it. So I was gonna wait until a little bit later, but
Cool. We can just
it actually had and this is one of the advantages of Microsoft using Chromium is it's actually I think it was this past Friday a Microsoft dev started working on Subgrid implementation for Chromium.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Microsoft,
so
thank you. That is, yeah, I do like that they are kind of teaming up in that regard. I don't love like, yay, we're all the same browser. Great. Google owns the web.
yeah,
But selfishly, if we get Subgrid, okay, kind of, all
yeah.
right.
It's kind of
A
nice
little bit.
having two large companies with resources that can push them forward, but at the same time, like
Yes.
you said, is can we not? There's something
Yeah.
that maybe isn't. Yeah.
Right, and I do support Firefox and their whole ethos for that reason because they're not the Chrome gobbling up the web or the
Mhm.
Google gobbling up the web, but they kind of stand for things that feel a lot more better when I try to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's definitely a thing. But yeah, okay, so that's fantastic that we can also use named areas or grid template areas with subgrid. That's really neat.
Yeah. So what we can do now is move on to the next section, and I'll let you sort of do a little bit on here to see how you would approach it, because this is where I went back and forth with a few different ways, and I'm curious what somebody with that hasn't really played with it much or might have a completely different way of looking at it. So if you go to the HTML first,
Cool.
if we want to get that, like where it says a great product, and then we have those little card things afterward, we want those card like each article that's there should be in its own column. So it'd be like the section title or whatever, a great product, and then three columns underneath it. So if you wanted to implement that now, what would you be thinking of doing?
Okay, so just so I can say it back, um, this is taking up the full width, but
Hmm.
these are in three columns here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So normally, that would be a new div where we would wrap this
Hmm.
in some kind of a div and give that a special class. Do we have three columns on the whole thing? Is that what we
So we're sort
have?
of set up to be three columns now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, it would be kind of this, but more like 1FR. I might head over to small CSS, which is Steph's site, to grab the little snippet there. I'm very big on like snippets. I don't
Yeah.
have nearly as much memorized as I should. But the snippet there that basically breaks things down with min max and like
Hmm.
as it
Hmm.
gets
Hmm.
smaller, just like the max content and a min max or something. I don't know, Steph, you showed it to me on air,
Is that
and
with autofit?
I think that might be it. And
Yeah.
I've been copying and pasting it from that ever since. But yeah, so basically I would
So
create a div here,
yeah.
wrap everything article, and yeah, we would have to make it happen that way. So
So
class, yeah.
yeah. And we can use for now. Let's just I like where you're going with that, but for now let's just throw the class the subgrid class on there that we created. And it should. There we go. So it's again using the parents grid that we created at the beginning.
Okay, I need a second to
Yeah.
let my brain wrap around this
Now it's not going to do
because
that cool responsiveness that Steph Snippet does.
sure, yeah, totally. But I mean, like but you'd be able to do that like globally, which is awesome.
Hmm.
Just being able to handle that once. Um, what? Um,
So if you
how does it know where? Okay, so the thing that's breaking my brain a little
Yep.
bit is the first column
Mhm.
off to the left. That's like a spacer column. I half expected this to get its own spacer column, or shift over or something. How does it know to start at the second column? Is what I'm trying to wrap my head around.
That's a really good question, and this is one of those things that I love with Subgrid is how it's actually what's going to cause us some problems when we look at the rows. But
Okay,
what it's doing, if you look at the parent grid, like our main grid, if you turn the lines on for that one,
cool.
or yeah, we can see them there. So the parent grid, it has those empty columns on the left and the right, so they're
Right.
there. Then we have this inner grid that's sitting, but that inner grid, it's not sitting on those outer columns. It's only sitting on those three that are across the middle. So when we declare display subgrid, it's sort of unaware of the ones it doesn't live inside of, and it's only looking at the columns that it exists within.
Oh, okay. So we put subgrid on this div, and this div only spans across those columns. So when we apply subgrid, it just looks and sees what columns am I in. I'm going to continue those.
Exactly.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, got
Yeah.
cool. That makes sense. Why would it work the other way? But for some reason, I just expected it.
But
Like I still have the mental model of okay, it's going to use that same grid again, which means we're going to get little spacers on the side, and here they
yes.
come. They're going to be no. It's using the grid. It's got it. Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
that example is great because I clearly don't have the right mental model yet.
Yes. And that's actually what you just said with that old, when you do it, it would come in with those extra ones. That's exactly the issue that we traditionally run into with grid as well, where if you wanted to reuse the same grid, but you were within, if this one element's bigger and this
Yep.
other element was smaller, it would just break everything and you couldn't do it
Yeah,
basically.
I've already got my padding columns. I don't want them in here. I want this to stay perfectly aligned all the way up.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And then if we were to add a gap, would like if we add a gap to the top bit, is it cool if I just throw that
Yep.
on? I just want to see
Go
how
for it.
that
Just you
gap.
did what I always do at the end. Just make sure you have the semicolon at the end of the grid template areas.
Oh, thank you.
I
Good
do that every time
eye.
too. So.
Good eye. Awesome. I'm gonna close out a DevTool so we see what it looks like. Yeah, that's great. That is, I mean, obviously there's nothing there yet. That's still just aligning to that one thing. But wow, okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Like as I shift my CSS grid understanding and go, oh, okay, we can just drill in and if you were still using something like a 12 column
mhm.
setup, you just all day you're just existing on that the same way you can like in Figma where like or some kind of design tool where yeah, like I can see the columns, I'm just gonna pop it on there. And because of subgrid like allows you to have that understanding of that like 12 column grid or yeah,
Mhm.
the 12 column grid, right? That's yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
um and you can just align things to that same grid. That's wild. Our friend Tom, we got some good chat. Sorry, chat. I'm sorry. It's probably the least I've been talking in the chat. I genuinely apologize. I've just been like engaged. So thank you so much for still being here and not just typing in chat. Alex is a jerk. I wouldn't fault you at all. Would not fault you because I have been completely neglecting you. So I just want to catch up real quick. Thank you for the follows. So someone tagged me a little earlier. Oh man, I missed a lot of chat. Thank you for being here and thank you for chatting amongst yourselves. I appreciate you. Silent Sound says, hope it helps spreading subgrid awareness to the front end community. The more the merrier, and the browser computer compatibility will finally arrive. I'm all on board. I am all on board. I'll sign whatever petition you have going, Kevin. I'll call my senator, whatever it takes. I will make it happen. Yeah, Me Too says, looks like 6 days ago. Yeah, as you brought up the status of the only item blocking work on Subgrid was changed to fixed. Okay, so yeah, that's why people are like, wow, Kevin Powell just started talking about it this month, and already it's like on its way to us. That's fantastic.
I'll gladly take full credit, even if it had nothing to do with me and it was a complete coincidence.
Ben Myers says Microsoft employees are pretty rad. It turns out. I'm sure he's saying that just out of the goodness of his heart and not. Yeah, anyway, how fitting. They also wrote Grid. Yeah. So the person who's fixing that, Kevin did it. Subgrid Awareness Month worked. Ed. Yeah. Subgrid rocks. This push for universal browser support. The more you push, the quicker it'll happen. Like I said, I will call my congressman. And I've been waiting since 2016. I want it now. In my opinion, it can be hard to grasp how intuitive modern CSS is becoming if you've been working around its quirks for a while. That's a really good point, Matt. Really good point of like, yeah, you've been hacking around this stuff for a while. What do you mean? It's a built-in feature now.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Roscoe. It's much appreciated. Welcome on the Subgrid lovers boat. Love it. Yeah, this is so cool. All right. So, do we want to keep working down the page, or what do you think?
Yeah, we might as well keep on getting a bit deeper into it. One thing that's actually really, well, let's stay on this section just for one quick thing.
Yeah.
There's two issues over a grid like this over something, say like a Flexbox solution, or even like with the auto fit, because the one you can't really use the auto fit like we could in, say, like one of like that's snippet that Steph had shared with you, because things would just start wrapping when you don't want, like, you really need to have sort of a defined grid. Luckily though, the nice thing with it is if you did need to redefine it within media queries, it's not, you're redefining your main grid, you're not redefining a whole bunch of different things. So it would be a bit easier just to have like your one column setup. And I've done something like this where my main grid has the same outer thing, but I just have one main column in the middle. And then when I get to a certain media query, then I add, I just use the repeat and change what the repeat is to give me as many as I need, basically.
That's nice. And then you can just change like the value of a CSS property rather than like writing lots and lots of grids and having to change each one of those grids and figure it out. But just like at this breakpoint, dash, grid repeat is 5 or whatever, right? It's just that's a really nice way to work.
And also, what I like over say, those traditional 12 column systems is, first of all, it's really easy just to, whatever your project is, you just need as many columns as your project needs.
Right.
Because I do think like the 12 works well for a lot, but maybe you only need 6 for that one, or 3 for this one, or you need 5 because you have this, an imbalanced design or whatever. So it makes it easy to do that. Right. It also makes it really easy to just set up custom sections. It's not like using, say, a Bootstrap grid system where you're just stuck within their 12 column grid. You put a div in, you don't put the subgrid class on there, and you do whatever you want on that. And you're not locked into it by any means. It's just this thing that you can hook into when you need to hook into it, which is really cool.
That's great.
The one thing that just sometimes gets things to be a little bit weird is, let's say we go to that, if you turn the inspector on, actually, in that 3 columns that we just created, and you turn the line numbers on.
Is this it? No, we gotta go deeper.
That's the fun of doing it within CodePen.
Yeah.
So the one thing that isn't consistent is the line numbers.
Interesting. Okay. Good gotcha there.
Yeah. So I don't think I have an example right now, but if we wanted to play with something where it was using the line numbers, like, you just want to make sure that the line numbers sort of go out the window, because for that individual one, even though it's using the existing columns, it's going to start counting at 1 again.
Got it.
So your line numbers don't necessarily line up with the parent's line numbers. So that can be something that just catches you off guard every now and then.
Cool. That makes sense.
So just to throw that out there, and it'd be something kind of important for this next part that we'll get to. So we can go down to that prices section.
Okay.
So again, I kept it really simple here, just since we were setting up a 3 column grid, but we can do the same thing and set up, we have 3 I don't know what I called them in this, or 3 cards in this case. So the same idea. Oh, is it cards? Oh no, I didn't even do it here. So we need to, oh, I did div pricing card. Okay, good. So we could do the same thing that you did before and just wrap that in a subgrid class.
Cool. Is that everything? Is that the rest of the page?
We'll find out.
Yeah, cool.
Looks like it's working.
Yeah. That works.
And this is where things can sometimes go, or actually, I mean, that works. We got our 3 columns and everything is great there. Where things can get a little bit funky sometimes now, is when we want to use it for rows. And I think there's a lot of really cool applications for using subgrid with rows, but we're going to see the one big flaw as soon as we try and
Oh
set it up.
man, because that's the thing that I have a lot of problem with. I think what you're setting up is like lines when they're not the same size. When I have like 3 pricing cards as you have here, and then one of them has like a 3-line description and one has a 1-line description, and you're talking to the client, you're like, look, I've got to align the button at the bottom. You gotta give me different copy here. Give me the exact same character count, please. So.
Yeah, exactly. So and subgrid really shines here. And actually, 2 things. When we're using it on grid template columns,
Okay.
one of the issues is like if a browser doesn't support it, the whole thing just collapses because it really relies on looking at the parent's column system, and if that's not working, it fails. So you just can't use it, or if you really wanted to right now, you'd have to come in with some backward, and at supports and give 2 different options for what if it's regular grid versus what if it's subgrid, which is sort of terrible.
Yeah.
Rows take a little bit more work, but the advantage is if it fails, it won't break anything.
Okay.
So it's actually a little bit more practical today, maybe, because you can get a better experience if it's working. But if it's not working, whatever. It's not perfect, but it fails gracefully, so we don't run into any major issues.
Okay. It just falls back to like like the just stacking them basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
It's as if nothing was even there in the first place, so
Awesome.
it doesn't break anything.
And
this is where we'll also get to look at nested subgrids for this part.
Love it.
So we could throw on each one of those pricing card classes, we could put in a subgrid class.
Okay, and then so just to point it out to chat, we're already in a subgrid class, so we're gonna have subgrid wrapping a subgrid, correct?
Exactly.
Got it. So pricing card. Do we have that yet? Doesn't look like it. Okay. And on every time you call subgrid, you have to do display grid, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Remembering.
And so this is where if the thing failed and the subgrid didn't work, this is what it would look like.
Okay,
because we've done a display grid, we haven't done anything else, and everything is fine.
Cool.
But now we can come in with a grid template rows of subgrid, and hopefully I said the right thing, and it should break everything. If we, okay.
You successfully broke everything. Yeah, nice.
This for me, when this was first happening, I was so frustrated, and I couldn't wrap my mind around what was happening. I was trying so many solutions. So before I give the solution, can you see if you're smarter than me and you can figure out what the problem is?
I was just gonna skip to, boy, am I glad Kevin Powell's here for my first time seeing this, because I don't have to sit through the hours of frustration of, oh, is web development really the career I want? Okay, let me actually take a real stab at it. Okay, why would it call out? Okay, so they're all getting the same row from their parent, or are they? Let me inspect. I can't be cheating. Inspecting can't be cheating. So yeah, they're all stacking up into the same column of this one, right? That's what it seems like they're all in the same column. It's kind of like stacking. If I were to give template areas, like if I do a named grid area and I give everyone the same name, they'll all stack. Is it the same effect of like they're all just getting that same area?
It's actually pretty much, yeah.
Okay,
They're all what's happened now is they're all living within that one cell. So it's
got
the
it.
same thing. Like when you do that with the grid areas, and that's, I mean, one of the nice things with grid is how easy it is to do that.
Love it.
But
Yeah.
obviously, we don't want that. And the issue that's happening now is when we set up our main grid, we set up grid template columns. So when we were using subgrid, it goes, oh, these columns are here. I'm spanning across this space. So, we set, if you go to the CSS and you go up a little bit, um,
This. Um,
we said to the main grid child selector that we made, the
oh,
further
this one.
down there, that one, we said, you know what, go from 2 to -2. So you're spanning across multiple columns. So because you're across those multiple columns, then when we use subgrid, it sees those columns and can place its content on those columns that it's spanning across.
Oh,
When we do the grid template rows, the parent only has like the pricing card itself is living within a single cell. So when all those children are going onto that cell's rows, there's only one row there, and everything just collapses into that single row.
got it. That makes
And
sense.
so, yeah, it makes sense, but it's when it happens and all your content piles on top of
Oh
itself, and
yeah.
you're just going like, "Oh my goodness, what did I do?" And the other issue with it is then you're trying to think, okay, well, I need to define rows, but I don't want to define rows for my entire site for this one element down here. Like, how is this actually going to work, and how can I get it to work? Um, and I know I got the solution from somebody, and I have no idea who it was, so I do apologize that I
Shout
can't
out to
give
them though.
credit for it.
Big ups to you, person out there. So
Yeah.
they know who they are.
Um,
They know who they are.
it was a blog post, and this was back when like Subgrid was first sort of coming out into Firefox,
Cool.
and I forgot about the solution, and I actually came in and I'm like, okay, um I need to have rows for these elements to live on, because right now they're living within a single row, so they're all stacking on top of each other. So I actually figured out like, okay, I could use some JavaScript for this, and then find which, because at the time I was also doing it with like, one list might be 6 items, one list might be 10 items. That means I need to have 10 rows. So I need to like have JavaScript, see the content, find the one that's the longest.
Yeah,
Then I could redefine a custom property to set my, like, as like, this is
I don't
getting
want
way
that.
too complex. This doesn't feel like it's the right solution.
Yeah.
But I was happy that it worked. But I was like, no, and then, so if it, I still, I'm not sure about the performance on this and if it could potentially cause issues or not. But if we go back to your pricing card selector,
Here. Cool.
and if you, I'm trying to think if it's on this one that we want it. Let's try. I
Sounds
might be
good.
mixing myself up. No, that's
Okay.
our. Sorry, I'm gonna mech things up.
No, mistakes are totally fine. I'm happy to throw it here. And go. Nope. That was a weird result. Let's try it somewhere
Oh,
else.
it is here. It is here. Okay. So then what we want to say, and this is one of those really weird things with grid, where, and I mentioned it earlier on actually, that if you say something should be living on the column 17, that it's
Okay.
going to create 17 columns automatically just so it can place that item on the 17th column. So if you define columns, it will make your columns, but if you say like, oh, I need this there, it's going to do magic behind the scenes. It's the implicit versus explicit grid, which gets a little into the weeds.
Yeah.
But so what you can actually do with an element is, even though it's living in a one cell right now, we could actually tell it to live across as many as we want. So just for fun, if you just throw, I think it's gonna be more obvious if we do it with columns first.
Okay.
So on there, if you just do grid column of a span 2, it's gonna break the layout a little bit completely. Oh, you know what? Put an outline on those as well, maybe, or a border, just so we can see them.
It's funny. My brain was so much in Gridland. I'm like, how do you do a grid border? What's
Oh
that?
yeah. Yeah. So
Got
what
it.
we've said now is like each one has to span across 2 out of the 3 available columns that we had there. So I mean that works well, and you could actually throw a span 4 on there, even though it's living within a 3. Actually, it won't break anything, will it? Yeah, it's creating an extra one in there that we can't see,
Yeah. It's like
just because it
smashing.
won't escape out of
Yeah.
its parent. So not the best example, maybe, but
Might be able to see it
yeah, if
if
you put the
we.
inspector on, you might. Does it say like
This is
one? I can't
two.
see clearly. Is it 1, 2, 3, 5?
It's not. It's covered up, so it's one,
Yeah.
two, three, and then two again. But this one goes to -4. Yeah, not sure. But it's there. We can.
Anyway, it's there, but it's 0 pixels big, so it doesn't actually
Yeah.
doesn't change anything. But yeah, I just think it's a bit easier to see when you do it that way over this way. So if we can delete that, or if,
Cool. I was
if
trying to. Isn't there like a visual that you can see for a grid? Grids. That's something different. I thought they would give you a visual sometimes.
oh, there is
But it's
one.
maybe
If you
not.
scroll down a little bit more on that right side
That's
panel,
what I'm looking for. But I thought they had them for grids where it would show you like the actual layout of
it's
them.
that right there. Go there, up
Oh,
a little.
this.
That one. Oh, it
Oh,
just
okay.
highlights it. Maybe I'm not sure.
Interesting. Okay. I thought there was one that showed you like the shape of your grid and kind of the thing,
Yeah.
but that might be my
I think what's
imagination.
happened is that last one is 0 pixels, just because it doesn't need it.
Right.
But let's delete the grid column there. We don't need that,
Cool.
and we can get rid of the border as well because it's not going to help us.
Cool.
And so we can sort of take advantage of that, and instead, we can tell it to span as many columns as we want. We can also tell it to span as many rows as we want, even though we never defined any rows to begin with. So on the pricing card, we can say grid row and give it a span.
Just
And then this is where I got stuck, and I'm like, I don't know how many to make it span. So you can start with like say 4. Magic numbers always suck, but it's probably not enough. And it's starting. And then this is where like if it's dynamic content, you're swearing because you made it work, and then the content changes, and then your thing's not long enough. But this is
ah
where we'd have to talk to browser people. I don't know if it causes paint issues or not. But instead of doing a span 4, you could just put a span 99 there and it
what
will work.
is
Are you
what
stuck
is,
in inspector mode?
no, I'm like trying to
Oh.
figure out what just what are we
Okay, so
doing there?
okay,
I'm not sure what's happening right now.
no problem. So we have our grid template row subgrid, and then we said that this pricing card has 4 rows in it because we're saying span 4. So it means there's a cell for base plan. Is the first row. The $39 is the next row. The text after that, so that first paragraph
Got it.
is
Okay.
the next one, and then there's only one left, so all the other content just piles into that last available one.
Got it. So so what I expected to see when what I expected to see when I inspected the DOM
Yep.
was like 70 rows all of a sudden added based on what you just said. Is that what
Right.
happened?
So, well, right now we've said that the price. Actually, that's a good question. Just leave it like that. Actually, can you
Okay.
put the main grid visualizer back on
Yeah, yeah.
in the dev tools?
Yep. Grid. There. Yeah. So like I went to see this to see if it was just like a
Yes.
ton.
And yeah, so we're only doing the span 4 on. Oh, okay. I know where we'll see it. So the pricing card is getting a span 4. So it's not affecting the parent grid right now at all.
Okay.
If you go in your visualizer and you turn on just the parent grid for that section, which was the
Got
subgrid
it.
class that we created.
Yeah, this one. Yeah.
Yeah, so now you can see that it's created, like, because we're saying it has to span 4, it gave the parent 4 rows.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay. That's not as so I thought we just added like 100 rows to our thing. It was gonna be like a huge performance nightmare. This
right.
isn't as
Yeah.
bad as I thought. Okay.
But then it's just where the span 4 doesn't work, so you need to know how many rows there are, or if you just put 99 there, or some large number
Yeah.
that's bigger than what you need. This is sort of an advantage of grid, is if one of those rows is empty, the default is 0 pixels tall. So it works for all of the ones that are there, and then you just end up with a ton of empty ones that are 0 pixels tall sitting at the bottom. It's not a solution I'm in love with, but it works. And that's where I don't know, like, is the browser painting 99 empty rows actually going to hurt like the paint performance or something like that? It wouldn't surprise me if there's something there, because it sort of needs to figure out like the height of those is always implicit on the content. So like I honestly don't know if there's any risk there or not.
Got it.
Um,
But
So
at
I,
least we can
yeah,
go a bit higher than what we think the maximum is going to be, right?
yeah,
Yeah, so we can go at least like to like 20 or something for this sort of setup and probably be safe.
yes, yeah.
Cool. But so now I'm noticing that this one line breaks and goes onto two
Yes.
lines. So then we
Yeah.
have this kind of a gap there, which is kind of what, like what we're asking for. So we can't really complain.
Yeah.
Um, because if we were to have like a button at the bottom of these pricing cards, which I feel like is kind of the thing that you face a lot, right? Like you have like
Yeah.
an
Like
image and then like
purchase
a
now or sign up. Yeah.
exactly. So buy now button. Yeah, so like you would want those to all be aligned. I mean, and
Hmm.
you can do that with like place self and things like that. But when you want the header to be aligned with all the headers and all the bodies to be aligned with all the bodies and all the buttons to be aligned with all the buttons, that's where it starts to be like, all right, this is starting to get a little messy.
Yeah, exactly. And if it depends on the type of things that, like, if it's a feature list where you're comparing features across, and like you said, sometimes one's really long and the next one's short. But like if you have a long list of stuff like that and the user just wants to like skim across each line, and then all of a sudden there's like a bigger and bigger offset with each one, um, that big gap is kind of annoying from a different sort of perspective. But if you had some styling where there's like a border on the top and bottom of each one, and then they're actually center aligned instead of
Top aligned,
just
yeah,
aligned, top aligned, and
yeah,
then a little bit nicer styling that could go into that, then all of a sudden those little things start disappearing. And I think it can make for a bit nicer of a user experience. And especially like if you shrink that down now a little bit, that two line one might become three, and it sort of exaggerates it even more, right? So you
yeah,
can see that it's really based, each one will line up with the other, even though they're siblings. And for
yeah.
me, that's the crazy thing is it's like these are three siblings that are all living on the same layout, which is crazy.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like I've had to solve this problem in hacky ways just on the front end horse website. I'm just like I got these freaking article cards and oh that person's huge name is like killing me right now, or like oh that the title, why did I make that title so long, right? Yeah, it comes back to
Yeah.
bite you, and so
Yeah. Yeah, those big headings are a nightmare sometimes for things when it just starts
yeah,
breaking your whole layout.
yeah, and it's like, all right, well, like I know enough CSS to like make this, but this is a content problem almost,
Hmm.
because CSS doesn't have like a fix for this yet. But this sort of thing coming in, this was a pretty good solution with the rows. So the big issue is this like kind of you got to shoot for the stars a little bit,
Yeah,
kind of.
that it's a bit magic numbery where
Yeah,
like you're just you're throwing something in there. If there is a better solution for that, I would love to know. But it's just you need to have it live across enough for each item, and there's not you can't actually. Could we? You know what? Delete the grid row that's on there. I just thought of something that might.
did you just solve this issue on?
I know. I don't think so because that's the pricing card itself. If we did grid auto flow row, would that change anything? It's the same issue because it's using, yeah, because it's on the subgrid, it's looking at the parent and it's saying the parent is one cell. So because the parent is a single cell, it's using that one cell, which is only one row, so it has to live within that one row.
Got it.
So yeah, that doesn't work. You really need it to span across multiple ones.
You have to declare some number.
Yeah,
You
there
have to give
has to
it
be
some number.
something. Yeah.
It can't just do an
It could also be something
implicit.
where maybe the parent has something to try and make it a little bit more, you could, if the parent, no, that wouldn't work either though. Because you really want to make sure that, I don't know. There must be
All
some sort
good.
of solution. I'm just not sure. I haven't figured it out yet. So if anybody in chat comes up with something, even if you don't have it now, make sure you tweet at me or something to let me know. Because this is one of those ones that works, but it doesn't feel very elegant.
Yeah, I definitely hear what you mean. I'm not above just saying, yeah, that's just the way we gotta do it, boss. Like that's just how we're doing it. If the
Yeah.
client puts more than 20, they need to call us, or more than 99 or whatever. It's just how that has to be. Uh, Yeah, but wow. And this is, so let me just get this, like before I say it, yeah, this is all based on this.
Yep. And that's, I mean, this goes to that, the whole idea of being able to simplify our HTML and our CSS, or our HTML, I should say. And if we
Yeah.
look at the HTML itself, like there's nothing, well, we have our main grid that's wrapping everything. It's one of those things too. I thought, like, do I just put this on my body or do I wrap everything in a main grid? I don't think putting it on the body would cause any issues, but for some reason I like having a main grid because I think just when you look at the CSS, having that class, like maybe it's even
Yeah.
body class as main grid. I don't know, but
Yeah. In CodePen,
um,
it's nice to say, like, this
oh
is
yeah,
what's
yeah.
wrapping everything. Yeah, for sure.
Um, and then after that, we just sort of have all of our sections of content, and if we need it to be on the grid, we throw a subgrid class in there to sort of wrap whatever happens that we need more grid work on. So that whole idea of needing, all these different moving pieces, I find it just helps simplify things on that level and makes it so when you're looking at the content, you know what's going on. It's a lot easier to understand. And you're worried more. It's nice when you're writing the HTML and you're more worried about the content and not content and layout at the same time,
Yes.
as much, at
Yes.
least in my opinion.
No, absolutely. Hey Marco, welcome. And thank you for those follows. That's always been my big push for Grid is that like, can I do this layout with Flexbox? Yes. But it's gonna take me like I'm gonna have so many divs in there that just don't need to be there once you
Mhm.
like if you refactor a Flexbox based like full page layout to Grid, it's just like deleting divs. It's just like, all right, I
Yes.
don't need
Yeah.
this container div anymore. I don't need this column. That just it's just getting rid of so much stuff. And what you're left with, it looks a lot more like this, where you've got some semantic HTML, not just for the sake of,
Yeah.
all right, I need a column, I need to put this here, but it's actual like this is helping out semantically. And then this is just content, right? That's just there. Steph with gifting 3 subs. Thank you so much, Steph. You are fantastic in every way and just super generous. Thank you so much for that. Wow. And thank you for following. Goodness, so many people. Are my emotes not working? I'm not seeing any emotes. What's going on? Is that did our B1 Mind? I think your sub expired. I keep seeing him doing the cheers, but it didn't happen. I'm like, is my stuff busted? Sorry, buddy. Yeah, no, but so that's just a thing I love about Grid is that like it can feel like overkill at first, right? Like, oh, I'm like when you're just getting used to it, you still kind of like lean back on Flexbox. I feel like, but now
Hmm.
I kind of reach for it almost more than Flexbox, or
Yeah.
at least as much, right? Oh, and be in mind, you just gifted subs. You got Brett, thank you so much. Oh my goodness, so much going on. People are going wild
Yeah, we're getting
for
a hype train on the
Subgrid.
way.
Oh my, a hype train is close. Sub gift
Nice.
use, yeah, it certainly is. Just call me Steph Grid Eccles. I like that the grid is within the name, like a subgrid, right? It's no jokes are not good today. They're never good, but they're especially bad. We lean into bad jokes around here. That's exactly what we do. Whoa, Ed just gifted 5 subs. My goodness, full out hype train, Ed. Thank you so much. You are phenomenal, and I think B1 Mind also just subscribed for himself. Chat, you're going wild. Thank you so much. Y'all are fantastic. My goodness, great to have everyone here. This chat's loving it. Got 50 people in here. Chat, you are fantastic. Lots of follows, lots of subs. Yeah, level 3 hype trade. All right, wow.
Nice.
So did we want to hit anything else here?
We could, one thing that could be fun to look at,
Yeah.
as well, if we have time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say, like right now, we sort of did it on that top section, but you sort of hinted at a problem that could come up. So I want to look at a solution, and it's when we did the full width, and then like all the content sort of just it goes into that first filler column that we'd created,
You mean like
which sort of sucked. And then we used our grid template areas to fix that because it was just fun to explore how that could work,
Oh, right.
right?
So you got yeah.
So why don't you can choose one of those other sections that we have on the page right now.
Okay.
But
Do
and
this one.
oh, you know what though? It might. Okay, we're gonna have to. We'll have to do a couple of things I think to get it to work. But we'll try. We'll experiment a little bit. But I want to look at just sort of how we can solve this problem.
Okay.
Or it's not solve a problem, but let's say we choose whichever one of those sections that we had, and we do. I don't know if we had a specific class.
I don't think we do. Let's just do the pricing one then.
Um,
Or no, it's a
so
pricing card. We need a
uh,
whole section, right?
yeah, so if we wrap one of those in a section,
Okay, so this was what? Product section? Sure. Not the best
sure.
name, whatever.
So
Um,
let's say we wanted that. It's very common. You get sort of different areas on the site, different background colors that stretch full width.
mm-hmm.
So give it a background color if you're choosing.
uh, uh, that's one of my go-tos.
Nice. Perfect. And now we have that issue where because we said that it's part of the subgrid, or it's not because of the subgrid, it's because of how we set up we said all the children of our main grid were living within that smaller area.
Right.
But we did create a full width class. So let's add that full width class into the HTML where you did that subgrid product section. So we can say full width. And that will break the layout a little bit because that first column is trying to squeeze into that space that we had.
Got it.
And this is so that would sort for me that's sort of a deal breaker across this design pattern because if ever you want those background colors and stuff, but luckily
Yeah.
there's a nice easy fix for something like that, which would be on the full just after your full width class actually.
Um, so after, you mean like
So
inside
no,
it
like
or?
no, a new selector. So do
Okay,
full
cool.
width again, and
Got it.
then direct child, and then first. So it's colon first child. And then we can say that the grid column is 2.
Ah, okay, nice. That's a pretty simple fix.
And
Great.
then that fixes that, and everything should work from
Yeah,
there.
that's perfect.
And you could come in and something like that should work every single time because ideally the whole idea is that your content is always staying within that container region, and then you can break out when you want to.
Right.
I have done other ones where I'm even like this case it doesn't work so much because it is a 3 column one where if you had something that could like be a nice even split, so say it's 6 or 12, or that also breaks it. This
Yeah, I was
okay,
curious about this.
yeah,
I don't mean to
this
throw a
is
curveball. I was
no,
curious
it's
for
good.
myself. I'm not trying to come in here going like, well, what about this, Kevin? Like,
Yeah, no, that's a good one too. I'm tr So this would be a little bit, I think, dependent on how many columns you have. I'm trying to think if there's an easy way to ease. I know. I think I know a fix. Let's try. I haven't done it before, but I think I know a fix. I
awesome.
mentioned I mentioned it once and I never tried it, so let's see if this works.
Cool.
Whereas if we say, and this is a selector I always mix up, so just after that first child selector, we can do another one that's full width. And then it would instead of first child, it would be a direct descendant for nth child. And this is where I always break things. We want every fourth one.
Oh, like the 4n+1 kind of thing, or for
Yeah.
like n plus
So I don't know if
four.
is it
I
3n+1 or 4n+1? Let's try one and see what happens.
I always have to like go reference it or play with it for five
Yeah.
minutes before I go. That's the one I want. Yeah, that I don't have this I don't have a good mental model around this either.
And actually you could give that one a grid column of 2 also, just to say it always has to be on grid column 2. And by default, grid won't overlap content. So it should make a new row for that to pop onto, I think. Oh,
Nice.
there
I
we
think
go.
we
Yeah,
nailed it the first
nice.
time. Awesome. Um, Marco in chat. Marco says, Kevin, I really like your YouTube channel. I am already a developer, and your videos are helping me to improve my English. That's awesome. And Marco is
Nice.
verified. I think that means. Does that mean that Marco streams here? Marco, do you have a stream on here? I think that means like they're a partner or something. I'm not sure exactly, but if so, that's awesome, Marco. It's great to have you here.
Definitely.
It's great to have you here regardless, Marco. I'm not trying to say you're only valued if you also stream, but just happened to notice that. And Ed says, I get all excited and we'll definitely play around with Subgrid. And then remember that probably have no practical real life use case for a while it's still. But we just saw that it might be coming sooner than we think. And this man, Kevin Powell, has everything to do with it. I think he wrote the code by hand that's getting shipped. No. But we saw earlier that there is here. I forget who dropped this in the chat. Sorry, I apologize. Was it Silence Sound who dropped it? I apologize. I don't remember who exactly shared that out. I want to find. It's me too. Me too. Thank you for sharing that. So that is at least good news. It's momentum, right? Like it's not just a dead ticket anymore.
It's so exciting that something's happening, and I'm really hoping with Jen at Safari that she's trying to get them working on it as well.
That'd be great.
Because that's always these days that seems to be the killer is Safari.
Yeah, it definitely is not. It's not the killer. I'm not trying to completely blame Safari, but yeah, like now that IE's gone, it's like it's kind of Safari that's holding a lot of things back.
And
yeah,
and another thing I just that I'm a little bit worried is Safari. It's always been kind of cool in the sense that they sort of are pushing their own, like they're not just following what the other browsers are doing. Like they were the first to implement a whole bunch of different things. They're the first one who's getting into the color spec. They've already done some stuff there. They had stuff with like the first letter selector or something like that, like long ages ago, and they always seem to have these random things that no other browser supports that they actually have support for, which I think is cool. That it shows they're actually putting resources into continuing to develop it. But
yeah,
it's just, I think it was on Shop Talk Show where they were sort of worried about this potential thing where like every browser is supporting their own features, but nobody is supporting the same ones. And the more
yeah.
features that are getting added, the more chances that could actually happen because there's, it's easy to divert attention onto different directions.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you're just like, oh, sorry, this is a Safari website. And then you have a feeling this is a Chrome.
Yeah.
Like what am I designing a site for? And you have to kind of go to this like boring middle when like
Yep.
over here Chrome has like voice to text API, cool, and then over here Safari's got that first letter selector, cool, and it's just like, and in the middle it's like you got what everyone kind of agreed on, and it's kind of like boring, but
Yeah.
no. But yeah, hopefully we don't go that way. And KBet says everything old is new again regarding all the browsers supporting different features and spec. Yeah, that's a really good point. Hiring posts for Safari, Steph. Thank you for dropping that in there. Yes, if you are fantastic people who can help us with all this stuff, please go work at Safari and do that. And Thomas says means potentially working with my biggest idol ever, Jen Simmons. That would be super cool. And they're hiring a bunch of people. Yeah. So definitely go do that. Awesome. I threw that fourth card in, and I think I stole your attention there. You
That's all
wanted
right.
to do something else. I was just curious how we'd handle that.
Mhm.
What did you want to hit up?
I don't remember now.
See, I'm
It's okay
sorry.
though, because I think this is more interesting and more practical. Because that whole idea of just like random content, oh, we added more content, it shouldn't break
Yeah, we can't have
everything
four
that you're doing.
articles, boss.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a good look.
Yeah. One thing I have experimented a bit, and I'm not, because what I did is you could set up like on your main grid, you could do it with like a lot more custom properties involved in it. So instead of saying the repeat three, it could be like a custom property with how many you want.
Right.
And then you could play, and that's the magic with grid with having the negative and the positive numbers for like the grid columns, is it doesn't matter how many there are, it's always going to be from the second to the second to last. So it's always going to fit the area that we want it to.
Oh, that's nice.
So that's really handy. So that this could be a nice way to get something that's a little bit more customizable, and even within your media query, then you could just redefine what your grid repeat is, and not have to like even redefine the whole grid template columns because it's kind of weird. And I think this is, if somebody new comes onto the project, it's a lot easier to see. I have a grid of 3, so it's nice and easy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
because
think you could develop a nice system, but it would take, this is where it would definitely take some work. And I've been playing around, but like, because you have your custom property of 3 there, in other areas you could use calcs based on that number to make sure things are working. Because say you change that to a repeat 4, then our nth selector that we created before is going to break. So,
Right.
right, but then I'm like, maybe, and because then it would have to become, I
Can
guess, a
we
4n if we made it 4 columns
can
or
we
whatever.
use that? No, we can't use it in the declaration, right? Like
But
I
that's what
couldn't.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, those types of things are always like, I don't know how we can use them
Yeah.
when it comes
But
to custom properties.
I
So I
can't
don't,
do var there. I don't think, right?
let's see. I don't know. We'll find out.
Wait, grid repeat. There's no way.
Because it just, oh, it's
Code
giving us
pen's
an
still
error.
not happy. Yeah. Yeah,
That
that
would
would
be
be
a cool
cool.
thing to be able to do, though.
That'd be
It's
super
expecting
cool.
n. Hmm.
It's expected n.
That's frustrating. That would be
Yeah.
pretty cool if we could do something with that. Because that's, I think, one of the gotchas where it sort of maybe becomes a little bit fragile. And maybe there's a solution where you can still pull it off. I'm just not 100% sure. Because ideally, that's like if you could create a nice system with this in place as like a template almost, where then it's like, oh, this project needs 12. You switch that one variable and
Yep.
everything through can just update and work with that. Is sort of where you sort of end up with a happy solution, I think. But if that 3n can't be calced or used variables or something, then it's not quite as handy.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Like as you're talking, it's like kind of unlocking in my head where these can just be like site sections that, yeah, as you drop them into different projects, you want wider cards or thinner cards or whatever, and you don't even have to touch what's in here to change the
Yes.
layout because it's set to subgrid, and you're
Yeah.
just assuming that you're dumping it into a grid, and it's going to use the grid that you put it on. Wow. All right, Kevin, I'm sold. I'm sold. Seriously, send me the petition, change.org, whatever
Yeah.
whatever it is. Uh, yeah, this is
Well,
gonna be fantastic. Let's get it done.
and I mean, what I'm really looking forward to is just seeing like this is me who's been sort of scratching around in it and reading some articles and some Rachel Andrew things from back in the day when it was sort of all coming out and before things went quieter on it. But I think it's as with anything with this is it's once the more people using it is where you start the real cool stuff starts coming out. Like custom properties, I was just using them like Sass variables, right?
Right.
And it was like, okay, that's kind of cool, but it's longer for me to write that than it is the variable. Dollar sign's easier than this whole var thing. Like, why am I bothering? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, look, this is a little bit cooler, and oh, I can do that, and I can use JavaScript
Yep.
here, and then this whole world gets sort of unlocked on those. And I think that this is another one of those ones that the more people that are using it, and as Chromium starts gaining support for it, I think we'll start seeing a lot more people using it. I'm excited to see the solutions that start coming up for all of this, and I think it's just another step in making layouts so much better and more fun to create.
More consistent, easier to keep consistent. Yeah, just I absolutely see the power. Um, so Ed says, so what if we went 4 columns in that tomato section? Ed, I am so glad you asked. I think it's just that, and then we'd have to change this. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
it. Just like that, Ed. Because and that applies to our pricing too. Like we could, if we needed this to stay 3 and kind of be centered and everything, we would probably have to bump the whole grid up to like a 12 or something, because then we
Exactly. Yeah.
need to like span 2 and do that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's really that simple in terms of changing your entire layout. That's just
hmm
so cool. Um,
And the cool thing there too is if you set up with like say a 12 column, or even I was doing it with a 6 column grid too, where I know Steph's here and I know she's not a big fan of just this whole like we're the grid systems in general and how the web can move away from them, and I'm
yeah,
fully on board with that 100%. And this sort of brings that idea back that we can follow that Figma design now, like
yeah.
we mentioned earlier. But again, what I like with this is it's so easy just to like this section needs it, this section doesn't. This section's going to be something completely different. Like you're not adhering to it. It's just when you need it, you can hook into it. But if you did have a 12 column grid, when you do like like right now we have a subgrid class and a full width class. So like
Right.
you could have a subgrid class, then you could have a 3 column class, a 2 column class, a 1 column class, whatever you need.
Right.
And then just with these child selectors like we've been doing, so it'd be like you know, 2 column. So yeah, dot 2 column, and then direct children span two, and then oh, I need 4 columns. So then it's going to be direct children span four or span whatever it is. The spans would just adjust, and then it selects all the children, and it just makes sure that it works within that section. So I think things like that could be pretty cool. And then you don't have to go on like each child and to like set it up. And then if you needed to overwrite it and you need one big child, you could even have like a span 4 class, and that one thing could be bigger than the other ones as well. There's nothing stopping you from doing that.
Yeah, that's
So even
fantastic.
now, if you go onto the pricing cards and add on like make a new class that's a grid column, like say, or
Oh, so you want a new class grid column?
say two, I don't know, and then it's just like a grid column span two.
Uh, Grid
Yeah,
column.
just like that.
Oh,
And then
oh, oh.
yeah, and then
Yeah, my
span two. And then if you go in on the HTML and just add that to any of the pricing cards that we had. And then that
there
one,
you
I mean,
go.
it doesn't look fantastic because there's not enough content, but then that one just takes
Yeah.
up that space.
But
Yeah.
then as this number of columns increases and you start to get the proper. So my only question here is now, if we're setting specific classes like column two,
Mhm.
responsiveness gets tricky, doesn't it?
Well, because it's a span two, it just means that, yeah, we would have to be a little bit careful with that for sure, because we've sort of done that. So maybe that would be one where it's only like, say, when you're at the initial like outside of your your initial setup where it's more mobile situated, that
Right.
class wouldn't even exist. And then once you get into your media query and you add in your column system, then you could say that that span two becomes we span two, span three, or whatever. I
Got it.
think it could be a little bit tricky if you had like say you might have to play around with things a little bit, or it depends on, I guess, how robust the system you want to build out is
Yeah.
going to be as well. um, I could see this being something that you slowly build. At the beginning, it's going to be sort of it does something, and then you come up with a new case that you need, and you can add that to your file, and that just like you sort of build up that template, and you keep just increasing it as the different edge cases and use cases come, and it could become more and more powerful. And again, this is how I sort of have started seeing it because I really think Subgrid makes that big picture grid that everybody always thinks of as like an actual reality that we can use now. So that's how I'm seeing things. But I'm sure that even on like smaller scale elements, that there's potential for using subgrid in really cool ways too, that maybe are a bit, as I said, smaller scale instead of this big layout for consistency in that way. But I'm not sure quite what they would be yet.
Yeah. How do you see subgrid and query or container queries working together? Because I'm trying to think like, all right, I get what this means for like layouts in general. Now I'm trying to
Mhm.
imagine how does this mesh or work with container queries? Is that going to be like wow, like this is a superpower, that's a superpower? They're like going to just multiply each other, or like what do you think?
I think so. They should multiply each other, right? So like instead of a lot of this be trying to think.
Yeah,
It's
it's
it's something that, yeah, we definitely have to play with it. I mean, even when the container queries, I played with them as soon as I could, and I'm super excited for them. But now there's also like the query units that are coming too, right? So like a font size could be relative to its parent's width and stuff like that. I almost think that's going to be used more than just like the actual container query itself, because that's going to cover so many of the use cases
got
of,
it.
and you said you have this giant font size that all of a sudden maybe it won't be an issue because if you have a small space, it can live in that space. But I think within even one thing I'm actually wondering on the container query, front is where like what's going to happen with media queries versus container queries.
Mm,
Because we're always doing at media, and I think on the large, like at a large scale for layout, it works. But there's obviously the issues like component wise where container queries are really going to shine.
right.
But like is there a reason to even use like max and min width media queries anymore? Even if it's the viewport is the parent, do we just switch to container queries? Because then, why not? Like, I'm
Right.
not sure. I'm curious where that's going to land as that sort of fleshes out and becomes something that people start using and everything, and where we land on there.
Yeah, that's yeah, I'm very excited for that. Do we know when I know that's in Chrome Canary. Is that working its
Yeah.
way into
Steph
anything?
might know more than me,
Yeah,
so
Steph
if
taught us about it
she's
on the stream.
yeah.
Also, Steph says, "Is anti-grid design?" And then she also uses grid strongly on her site, and also works on a site very beholden to a 12-column grid to pay my bills. It's fantastic. Steph says, seems like focus has switched to cascade layers. Oh,
Mm,
above container queries. Got it. It's another like we said, like there's just like so much happening in CSS right now.
yeah.
Chat, if you feel overwhelmed or if you feel out of touch or like like oh I focused on something else for 6 months and I come back to CSS and there's 12 new things. We're all feeling that way. It's not just you. Like there's just all of a sudden a lot's happening. It's all for good, and it's not something that you're gonna have to like pick up tomorrow or you're left behind or anything like that. Like, yeah, just
It's
it's
it's the CSS is and teaching people about CSS is literally my job right now, and I can't keep up with it. So please don't feel bad if you
th-
can't, because
there you go. There you go. Yeah. So chat, don't have like this FOMO feeling that I know people can get with like like the classic one is JavaScript frameworks of oh no, there's five more Java. It's like don't stress too much. The whole CSS things, cascade layers. If you're concerned, you don't know what those are. You'll find time when the time's right. It's all good. Um, but awesome. Was there anything else that we wanted to touch on or uh, link to the petition or anything? We
I mean,
talked about the gotchas, yeah.
the best way to show interest in it is just on that bug report. You can star it and just show them
Awesome.
I'm interested in this, and that's the same for anything. I don't want like this, I was very reluctant, and I haven't mentioned it on my YouTube channel of being like, go start the subgrid one just to show your support, because then I'd just be like, there's enough people watching these videos, and they're just gonna be, I'm doing it because Kevin told me to, and I'm like, no, no, please don't just like flood it all of a sudden, because that signal won't mean very much.
Yeah.
um, it's more about like if it's something, and that's for any of the bug reports, you can show that you're interested in stuff by starring it. And I've also heard just in general, like the browsers do keep their ears to the ground and they listen. So, they're looking at what's people are talking about on social media. They're seeing what people are blogging about and talking about and all of that. And they know sort of where the interest lies in things. And obviously they
Interesting.
talk amongst their own devs, and they have devs on their teams that are on not building the features, but using them. So that
Is Safari on some kind of weird social network where they talk about like first letter drop caps? Like sorry, I couldn't avoid the joke. Safari, you're fine. It's just like we keep our ear to the ground. Oh, they're all talking about drop cap. Oh, they want to style that first letter, boss.
yeah.
What?
Yeah.
We want grid to work right. That's what we want.
They do make it easy though a little bit to poke fun at
Yeah,
them.
sorry, Safari.
Even
Just all in good fun.
yeah.
But that's good to know. So blogging about it, talking about it, making code pens, all that kind of stuff, and yeah, that like the little developer Twitter community sort of thing,
hmm
stirring up some good trouble there might be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, as far as then that's what helps get them going. Because, I think a lot of people see it's like Google is, Chrome is Google and Safari is Apple, and it's these companies that have unlimited money basically. How come it just doesn't happen? But those departments don't have unlimited money, and the
Yeah,
teams that are actually working on the browsers aren't these massive teams with hundreds of people trying to do all this. They're pretty small teams.
and they get nights
Uh,
and weekends off,
yeah.
so they're not
And
working
some of
twenty four
these
seven.
things that they're trying to do now are complex. Like, when you do that thing where you just put in subgrid and it works, like it looks cool and it's so nice that that one line just makes the magic happen. But I
Yep.
imagine the algorithm to try and get that to happen
Yeah.
probably is not so easy. And
Yeah.
with, it's, I'm happy I don't have to actually make it work. I can just ask people to do it, and eventually they will.
I'm so glad that like I'm not talking to the Safari team where they go like, if you're so smart, you do it. I'm like,
Yeah, exactly.
I'll be quiet. Thanks for the capital letter thing. That's cool. So yeah, no, I totally get that. It's it's a weird kind of like side hustle that Google has, like Chrome, and does all this browser stuff. It feels
Mhm.
like, but yeah, I don't know. I'm sold. You sold me on it, Kevin, for sure. Like I thought I was gonna like it. I love it, and now I need to go live in a world that doesn't have it again. It's like
Yes,
you
yeah,
you
love
kind of
them.
took me on a quick time machine trip. Like check out all this cool stuff. All right, you got to go back now, buddy. It's like, man.
Yeah, sorry about
Uh,
that.
all good. No. So this is just me going. There you go, Amit. Good to see you. I know he's been on your YouTube channel and stream also
Only YouTube, but maybe
on
we
the
can get
YouTube.
him to
Awesome.
come do some lives
There we
too.
go. He's always up for it. Says start a subgrid hashtag. Good to see you, Amit. That's not a bad idea at all. So awesome. Chat, you were fantastic. Thank you so much for showing up and starting hype trains and a whole bunch of follows, everything. Chat, yeah, definitely follow if you're not right now, because tomorrow we have a super spooky event. We have a Halloween spooktacular. I'm really excited. There might be costumes involved. There's costumes involved. And we've got 9 people coming through to give
Nice.
quick little like trick or treat. I'm not gonna say they're like talks. They're more like we've got a couple demos. Yeah, I think for the most part we got some demos and some conversations around CSS, around trying to think like service workers, and some GSAP, some P5. I haven't even used P5. We got a little bit of that. Lots of little stuff coming. Who knows who's coming by? It's gonna be pretty spooky. And it's gonna be a blast. So please come by tomorrow. It is at 12 p.m. Eastern. So like 2 hours ago, but tomorrow. So I don't know. I always do that, but I hope that helps. Like wherever you are, you go. Oh, okay, yeah. Basically, same time this stream started, but tomorrow. It's gonna be a blast. It's gonna be a whole lot of fun. I hope you are in the chat when we do that. Silence. Those are cool emotes. I've never seen those here before. But yeah, so definitely be here for that tomorrow. Kevin, let's get your stuff out real quick. I want to drop your website and your Twitter. Is there anything else that you want to promote besides Subgrid?
I did just put out a free course if anyone's interested
Awesome.
into getting into sort of, if you're into CSS, don't do it if you're a beginner, because it's not a beginner course, it's more intermediate. So if you it's over on Scrimba, and it's all over my Twitter. It's a free course in collaboration with Front End Mentor.
Cool.
And
Someone just
oh, that,
mentioned
yeah,
it.
that's a free course
Oh,
too, but it's not on
cool.
my courses page. You just reminded me I have to add it.
Got it. Um,
Yeah, I'll have to add it
Scrimba.
there. Scrimba.com, yeah. And if you go to browse courses at the very top, it'd be the fastest way.
All
Yeah.
courses, maybe. There you
And build
go.
a space travel website.
Nice.
Um, and it's if you don't know Scrimba, it's a really cool like interactive platform. You can pause the video and then change the code in the video player and see live results and stuff.
Oh.
So it's pretty cool. So we cover like, there's a lot of modern CSS in it. We look at building a CSS design system and stuff like that. So
Oh,
it's
very
a fun
cool.
course that just came out. So I'm pretty excited by that one.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. And that was with Front End Mentor, who made the design. So definitely shout out to them as well. And normally Front End Mentor has like their free tier and then a paid tier. But they made the whole project part of their free tier, including the things that are still usually behind like a paywall. So it's a completely free like thing. So even if you don't want to follow my course, but you just want to build the
Wow.
project, it's all on their site.
That's awesome. I'll drop that link as well. Super cool. Congrats on that to you and
Yeah, thank you.
front end mentor. Very cool.
So yeah, it's a fun project. And other than that, yeah, I guess that's about it.
Yeah, I wanna
I'm mostly on YouTube and Twitter, and I stream every Monday. Most Mondays anyway. But most Mondays in the morning I'm streaming. So
awesome. Just
that's
dropped. Yeah, so go
about it.
follow Kevin every Monday, getting some fantastic CSS stuff right there. So Kevin, thank you again for coming on. Really appreciate it. Always fun to have you in the Discord. Love when you pop in and say hi, or in this stream chat here. Oh, and yeah, chat. We also have a friendly Discord. Definitely stop by there. I really like it there. A lot of the people, pretty much everyone that has been chatting is in there, and it's like a regular. So please stop by. You are more than welcome. And it's very friendly, nice place to chat CSS and animation, all that good stuff. So Kevin, thanks so much. And yeah, chat, we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, be here, and if you wear a costume, I'll give you extra points or something. I don't know. I'll figure it out. But if you wear a costume, chat, I'm going to be thrilled. Definitely send a picture in the Discord if you show up costumed, because that's going to be just the best. So, all right, everybody, take care. See you tomorrow.